Okay, hey Aaron, thank you for doing this.
Hey.
Obviously, you've been writing at mrstingy.com for a very long time. I've been reading articles for many, many years. But recently, your article on LinkedIn really raised my interest because you wrote about the 5 levels of wealth in Malaysia.
Six,
And I
sorry.
do, sorry, 6 levels. Yeah, 6 levels. And so, financial freedom is something that everybody seeks out, lah, right? And so maybe you start and tell me about why you became like the financial freedom advocate and to get into the weeds of the article.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Chuang. Let me start by saying that I wrote this and it lays out the Malaysian ladders of wealth. And the background of this article is I was reading a book. This book is by a friend of mine. He's based in the US and it is called The Ladders, the Wealth Ladder. And so I was thinking, he wrote about US households, he wrote about US dollars. Well, I'm just trying to think like, hey, if I wanted to do this in Malaysia, what would it look like? What does it look like for someone living in Malaysia? So I pulled through a bunch of data from EPF. I looked through a lot of reports previously, UKM, Kazana Research, etc. And then I proposed my own like 6 levels of wealth in Malaysia here. Now, you started the question by saying financial freedom. I don't necessarily think you need to be like the highest level of wealth to have financial freedom, right? Based on my article, I think you can have a very, very good life, or you can have some level of freedom and choice if you're somewhere in level 3 already. So I'll stop there and ask if you have any questions right now.
No, but what intrigued me was the fact that you said that you don't have to be level 5 or level 6 to be kind of like financially free, right? So I wanted to ask you about what you meant by that. But basically, talk us through the 6 levels.
Yeah, sure. So we'll start. I'm just looking in the other window for the article here, right? So first level. Firstly, I want to say that it's based on household wealth. Okay, household wealth or also a net worth, meaning that this is a measurement of assets minus liabilities. Yeah. So assets minus liabilities. I mean, those of you yourself definitely the concept of equity or net worth. So I think that's the important point, because I think up to now, mostly you'll see measurements of whether somebody is rich or poor in Malaysia, they will be measuring based on income, right? Now, income, I think, makes a lot of sense, especially because we're a developing country. However, you'll note that income has its limitations as you move higher up the wealth ladder. So, for example, somebody can really have a lot of high income, but if they are not careful about saving and investing, you'll see that their net worth is actually not very high. So the first point I want to make around the wealth ladder that I proposed here, it is based on household net worth. So let's start right at the bottom. Right at the bottom, I had struggle, which is based on household net worth of less than Ringgit Malaysia 25,000. So that's the struggle class. And then we have the working class, which is one level up, which is Ringgit Malaysia 25,000 to 250,000. And then the third level, which is middle class, which is 250,000 to 2.5 million. So slightly controversial, a lot of questions here, but I guess we can get into that later. Next is affluent. Affluent is 2.5 million to 10 million. Rich is 10 million to 50 million. And super rich is above 50 million. Okay, so shall we jump straight into the struggle level? Okay, I'm going to jump straight into the struggle level. Okay, so the struggle level itself is where I define it as every ringgit you spend matters. Okay, so you're not really in a position where you are comfortable. You're in a position where you have to count every ringgit. By my methodology, it's about 37% of Malaysian households are struggling here. So this is obviously something concerning. And the actions for level 1 is basically, I think, what you'll see at the very basic or foundation of personal finance, which is number 1, to manage your debt, and number 2, to build emergency savings. So that's level 1, right? When you get to level 2 is about working class, basically somewhere between struggling and middle class. Working class, again, household wealth between 25,000 and 250,000. The statement that I like to put here is the higher you go in this range, the less the price of groceries matter. Or if you read the book, the Wealth Ladder, it is also loosely defined as grocery freedom. So in this range, you are starting to choose the type of groceries that you can buy. It's not purely about the minimum cost that you're trying to look for. So you have a bit of choice in the groceries. I just wrote in this article that you're not in the danger zone, but you're still worrying about money. You're still thinking about money, right? You're not like completely free at this stage. So 35% of Malaysian households are here, and also median household wealth in Malaysia falls here too. Now, Where exactly that falls, I think there's several sources that I've read before, 2012, 2022, 2013, but I'm very confident that median household wealth is definitely in this level. So this level 2 working class. Okay, shall I go on to level 3, Sean? Okay, cool. So level 3 is, I think this is quite interesting. This is middle class, okay? Middle class. And the household wealth here is 250,000 to 2.5 million. So the statement that I like here is the higher you go in this range, the less the price of restaurants matter. Okay, again, I got this idea from the Wealth Ladder book. Basically, at the lower levels of this range, you're basically transition. Well, obviously, it's not like a black and white thing, right? There's thresholds, there's sort of a range of things. But the general principle is at the lower levels of this range, you would have some choice in your restaurants, but at the higher levels of this range, as you get to like 2.5 million, 2 million above, the price of restaurants don't really matter that much to you anymore. You have very, very much restaurant freedom. Okay. According to a research that I read from KRI, which is a Khazanah Research Institute, I would map it to where they call this middle class or aspirational consumption. Aspirational consumption standard of living. So I think it is the idea of middle class that perhaps you and I, that we grew up with, right? Basically, you have maybe an imported car, and then you are, living, you go for vacations, and then you have a lot of aspirational choices. So for example, luxury goods may not be completely out of reach. You can still buy, but you have to be like quite selective with it. So again, I just want to be clear, the word middle might be confusing, right? True middle, like the right in the middle, if you take like 100 Malaysians, like number 49, number 50, that's in level 2. Level 3 is what we call, again, middle class standard of living. So again, restaurants, you're thinking about where you get the latest iPhone, where's your next vacation. And by my methodology, about 25% of Malaysians' households are in this range. And the action is perhaps very, 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 very relevant to many of us and perhaps many of your listeners. The action here is to invest wisely, right?
Sorry. So we've got 35%, 35%, and then 25%.
So we got 37% at level 1, 35% at level 2, and then level 3 is 25%.
So that's 97% of Malaysian households.
That is 37 plus 35%, that's 72% plus 25%. Hang on, let me see. Are we talking about 92% of Malaysian household? Hang on, wait,
25.
let me just check.
35 then 37 is 72. Sorry, 72, yeah.
Yeah.
And 25.
Correct.
So that's
Correct.
nearly every single household
Yep.
that has a household wealth of less than 2.5 million ringgit.
Yes.
And that is essentially 500,000 US dollars, right?
Yes.
If I take, right?
Like
So that's not a lot. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's not
in
a
the
lot.
larger scheme of things, right?
Yeah, it's not a lot.
So that's quite concerning.
I mean, it's the thing about wealth is it's of course relative, right? I mean, when we convert it into US dollars, it's not a lot of money. But depending on standard of living, right? I mean, at level 3, I would argue that you can have that middle class standard of living already. And again, middle class is like what we mentioned. You can perhaps buy an imported car, maybe not the luxury type of car, but you can have some kind of luxuries and some kind of aspirations here.
Okay, so then level 4. So level 4 is like how many percent, right? What is level 4?
Okay, so level 4 is what I define as affluent, household wealth of 2.5 million to 10 million ringgit. And the statement that I like here is the higher you go in this range, the less the price of vacations matter, right? So when you're at the top of this range, I want to go to, wherever. I want to go to London. If I want to use business class, sure. I also pulled in an example that, if you want to send your kids to university, say overseas, you could very, very likely do it if you're in this range. Now, your question around like how many percent of Malaysian households are here, by my methodology, I would estimate roughly 2% of Malaysian households. Again, we can get into the methodology later, but it's based on assumptions and it's a very small percentage already.
So 2% of households would equate to how many individuals?
Yeah. Okay. So the sort of proxy that I've been basing my data on it looks at the EPF holdings, the EPF savings of roughly 16 million Malaysians. And, there's a little bit of, I guess, considerations around like how many individuals makes a household, etc., etc. But I think for the basis of this article, I've just taken a very, very broad assumption that one individual represents one household, right? Probably it's definitely not like this if you look into it in detail. But again, I'm making this kind of assumptions just so that we can have a very broad picture. Back to your question, if we're talking about level 4, what I'm seeing here in my table here, 153,000 people who are in level 4. And then the levels above level 4, there are about 108,000 people. So basically level 4, 5, 6 are roughly 360,000 people. And this is based on 2023 EPF data.
Wow. Okay, so that's still quite a lot more than a quarter of people. So, but I think the real question is, how do you get there, right? How do you go from 1 to 2 to 3? And then I think 3 to 4, once you're in 4, that's reasonably comfortable, right? So, I mean, of course, level 5 and level 6 is really like crazy money, right? 50 million, 100 million.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be really out of reach for most people. So I think really what is your advice, or what is your thinking or your principles for going from 1 to 2, then 2 to 3, then 3 to 4? Then 4, I guess, is maybe considered the top.
Yeah.
If you even think that way, yeah.
Yeah, I think if you look about it, if you think about it, and if you also look at the original book which inspired my thinking around this article, it's that you don't get to level 5 and 6 by being employed. Okay, you don't get to level 5 and 6 by being employed. Now, of course, there are exceptions. Okay, maybe you play in the English Premier League. You become a top striker in the English Premier League. Okay, you could be in level 5 and level 6. But for the majority of people, you're not going to get to level 5 and level 6 unless you start a business. You start your own enterprise. You get into things like having equity and so on. So in other words, probably level 1 to 4 is going to be the range in which most people will be able to play with. And arguably level 4 is already the top of that, right? Level 4, arguably you gotta be like a high-powered executive or a high-powered doctor, high-ranking lawyer or something before you're gonna get into the level 4. So I think actually at the end of my article, I did mention that I think level 3, sort of like a baseline aspiration for most Malaysians, I think that would be something to aim for first. Now, if you get to level 3 and you're thinking, oh, should I get to level 4, level 5, level 6? I think that's a different matter. But level 3 should be where you're aiming for first. And level 3 is basically the middle class lifestyle. It's already quite small. It's only 25% of Malaysian households there. But I think what you'll see in personal finance, right? A lot of personal finance, which is things like managing your debt, building emergency savings, increasing your income, like moving jobs to get higher and higher income. And I think lastly, investing wisely. Those are the kind of things that will help you move levels, and you hopefully will be able to reach level 3 and then consider if you want to move to level 4.
Okay, so there's two parts, right? One is, of course, making more money so that you can save and put some aside. The second part is how to make the money grow for you, right? So
Right.
on the first part, to earn more income, the rules are different now, isn't it, Aaron? Doesn't matter if you go to university now. You can still go to university, pay a lot actually. Local university, you can pay a lot. But then it doesn't mean that you come out, you get a job, and you're gainfully employed, nor would you get a good schooling. So those rules are different now, and I think a lot now are even thinking of not going to university because it costs so much, it takes so much time, and they can't get a job, right? So how are you thinking about that?
Yeah. So I'm just going to preface this by saying that a lot of this article that I've written here, again, based on personal experience, based on readings and so on. So I wouldn't, number one, claim to be an expert on, university studies today and so on. But the general principle or the lifelong sort of ancient principles that I uphold dearly is that, number one, education is not just from formal education, right? Education can be in the source of self-learning. There's so many materials online today. If you talk about things like AI tools and, 20 years ago, basically, internet was the fad, and today, AI tools perhaps are the fad. So I think these are kind of things that, I can't speak for general big portions of the population, but if you're someone with agency, you're someone who wants to push yourself up, who wants to move levels, I think these are the kind of things that people need to look into, equipping their skills so that they can get better jobs, making themselves very, very indispensable to the new wave of technology and industry that's coming.
Yeah, so I know that purposely, I think you're quite intentional about your career engineering. You did really well, actually. You got a first class honors. So well done. That
Thank
put
you.
you in the top 1% or 0.1 percentile. So you're academically very smart. Then you went for Fortune 500 companies. You worked in social enterprises. You quit a comfortable job just to see what it's like on the other side. And then now you work for a digital asset firm, which we'll get into later, right?
Right.
That whole element of financial freedom. If you were advising your 21-year-old self now, right, what would you tell him? How would you guide him in terms of preparing himself to tackle the world?
Yeah. I think a couple of points. I think number one is definitely don't ignore your interests. And I'll say this from experience because since university, I was interested in things like personal finance. I was interested in investing. I was interested in technology. To a certain extent, I dabbled, I read a lot. And today, 20 years later, or 17, 18 years later, I am working in this kind of angles, right? The fields of investment, finance, technology, and so on. So number one would be to not ignore the things you're interested about, to go and explore them. It doesn't always have to make money immediately, right? You don't have to make everything into a monetizational game. So that's the first thing. Number two, I would encourage my 21-year-old self to study as much as possible, as much as you want to get grades, right? Just understand that grades are not the what do you call it? Not the end goal. What you're looking for is knowledge. People who go to university actually have a tremendous advantage. Your lecturers may be challenging to follow them, may be boring, etc. But if you're going with the right intention to develop your skills, to build your knowledge, I don't think that in 10, 15 years time, any of that is going to be a regret to you. And again, I'll say this from experience. The subjects that I was very interested in, I was very motivated. Many of them I'm still using today. Well, maybe not many, but several of them I'm still using today, and it's still very useful. And I think lastly, the third thing is it's gonna be a bit of a balance thing. Try to balance things, right? You want to explore things in the short term, but you want to also be thinking about the longer term. So, younger people, definitely you take risks, you try new adventures and so on. Definitely do it, because otherwise you would be wasting your youth, right? But also don't forget that there's a longer term. You need to think about your long-term health. You need to think about your longer term career potential. So for example, don't do, I guess you can do silly things, because when you're young, you always do silly things, right? But don't do like critical mistakes that will hamper you for the rest of your career. So yeah, I know I ramble a bit, but I think those would be the 3 points.
Yeah, so the financial expert, if you are a poet or if you're a musician or if you like to act, you like drama, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a passion for you, but seriously, right? Would you consider pursuing a career in it? That would be folly, right? So
I'm
that's the flip
yeah.
side. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm quite a practical person lah. I mean, when I say explore your interests, it doesn't mean that this is going to be my career for the rest of my life, right? I mean, I like to play music, I like to sing, but I like to play basketball. I mean, I'm very clear that this will never be my full-time career, because I'm just not tall or fast enough, right? So yeah, explore. It doesn't mean you explore you have to make money or make it your career. Jeff Bezos has a like him or not, Jeff Bezos has a very good quote. He says that get your job to liking just 50% of it. That's already quite good, right? I mean, some of us, we've been told, my generation and younger, perhaps some of us have been told that, oh, you need to absolutely love your job. You need to fall in love with it. No, never work another day. And I think that's that's quite dramatic and quite extreme. There'll always be parts of your job that you don't like, but you just have to do it lah, because it's discipline and it's the way society works.
Yeah, and then when it comes to if you want to go from level 4 to level 5 and level 6, right? I mean, the only way to do it is to start your own business, make sure it's really, really profitable, and then the traditional way would be to list the company, lah, right? And then that's how you go from whatever net worth 1 million to, if your company is worth 50 million ringgit and you own 20% of it, you're going to be worth 20 million ringgit, right?
Right.
And then your shares, you can do it to build more wealth, etc. The thing is, even the IPO market nowadays I mean, at least in the West, right? It's becoming quite passé because it's too slow, too expensive, too cumbersome, and it doesn't help a lot of companies. A lot of companies that want to go for listing, they can't because the pipe is just too narrow, right? But of course, in the digital asset space, you cannot, because there's a whole new world out there, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is, that's in America, that's in the West. IPOs are quite powerful there, but in Asia, in Malaysia, right? If you want to start a startup, if you want to do something in the technology space, Malaysia is a very small country, right? 30 million people. Funding is can't come by. People don't really understand it. You're selling to a market which is quite still, lower middle class, and so what would you advise young kids now, or fresh graduates, or people who don't want to go to university, maybe they want to start a business? How would you advise them?
Yeah, again, I'm not a serial entrepreneur, so definitely take my advice with a pinch of salt. I mean, I'm very much well, I guess I'm very much somewhat traditional career person because I've worked in corporate companies. The only thing is I've moved around several times. I switched industries. The one thing I'll go back to, and I said earlier, is that I think it comes down to knowledge and skills. And I've always believed that, you can gain knowledge and skills in any job that you do, and hopefully it is transferable to the next thing that you do. So in other words, you're not sort of wasting your previous experience. Again, I'll preface this by saying that, it's very, very uncommon and rare to get into the levels 5 and 6. Actually, level 4 itself is also quite uncommon, right? If you think about it, it's 2% of the households. Yeah, again, I think if you can, equip yourself with skills and knowledge, and hopefully a very, very good working attitude. I'm not gonna take away the element of, luck, or, some people say it's God's blessings, etc. I'm not gonna take away the element, right? Because a lot of life is also random. You cannot plan everything and say that, oh, this is the roadmap. But I think if you were to be able to equip yourself with the right tools, attitude, skills, hopefully you will be able to go into level 3. And again, level 3 actually have to take entrepreneurial risks to get into level 3. It can be a combination of working jobs, doing additional, maybe part-time gigs and so on. And of course, investing, saving wisely, and that hopefully will be able to get you into level 3, assuming you'd manage to get into high enough income.
Yeah, so today I was having lunch with a couple of so today I was having lunch with a couple of ex-CIMB bankers lah, and back in the day, CIMB was the place to work, the best
Right.
bonuses, the best salaries, the best perks, right? So one of them was saying, oh, in the last 15 years, the benefits have really gone down, and people are leaving the bank to go and start their own businesses. So the thing is, the opportunity to get quite wealthy if you are working for somebody as an employee, especially in the traditional spaces like banking or telco or let's just say finance, for example, right? Those also seem to be diminishing, partly because of AI, I guess, and partly because the economy can be quite volatile as well. So if you wanted to follow the tried and tested employee path, right, where would the new directions be?
Yeah.
Do you have to go abroad to Singapore? I mean, would you be forced to do that?
I mean, I'm quite nationalistic, so I've always tried to work for Malaysia, help build up the country, and so on. I would agree that Singapore is an attractive proposition because of the exchange rate. It's so high, right? And some people also they do basically, I don't know what I call it, geographical arbitrage, right? They live in Malaysia but work for a overseas company, right? Singaporean company, US company, European company, etc. It's happening more and more, by the way. That's what I see. But I also don't want to discount the fact that if you are good, if you're strong, Malaysia also definitely has opportunities, right? I don't want to say, give up Malaysia, go elsewhere. Of course, you have to be good lah, because, if you look at the stats, right, you want to get to level 3, that's like 25% of households. Fundamentally, you cannot say, oh, I want to perform at just the median. I want to be like a 50%er in terms of work and performance, but I expect to be paid in the top 25%, right? So I think there's an element of you have to perform. And yeah, I mean, the world of careers is such that you have to show your worth. It's not just about performance. And yeah, I think also in terms of shifting with the eras, again, I mentioned something about AI, and this is perhaps not just my advice, but a lot of successful people's advice is that if they were young today, they would be looking at how they can master AI, how they would be able to do AI tools or use AI tools to increase productivity, and that would bring very, very much value to any company that hires them.
Yeah, because I mean, at least in the West as well, and of course, Malaysia tends to be something like 5 to 10 years behind the West, right? But I saw news that Amazon, they are cutting I think like 90,000 jobs or something, and they've actually sent circulars out to their employees that they're going to be cutting jobs. But the thing is, they are now hiring a lot less people, or they're employing a lot less people, but they're building their margins because they're automating most things now, especially with AI, right?
Right.
Amazon famously had 1 million workers in their factories, but they're all robots, right? And then they had another million. So they had like 50% robots and 50% humans. But now I don't know what that ratio is. And those numbers are just, that ratio is being skewed in favor of automation now.
Right.
So how would you, I mean, okay, at this point I'm going to talk about, you work in a technology company, you work for, okay, let's just, you work for digital asset business called Luno,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
And you will see, because you're in the forefront of technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people say that investment and investment analysis is going to be automated. I mean, look, okay, let me just say, right? I tell you a little story, Aaron.
Sure.
A couple of nights ago, I was having dinner in a coffee shop, and I met this guy, Steven. I known him a long time. He was a Lego collector, but he's also a investor kind of person, right? And then he told me, I didn't ask him. He just told me, he goes, hey, you know what, cool, I asked AI, I'm 65 years old. I've got 2 million cash.
Wow.
I want to have, I think he wanted to have 20,000 salary. Was it 20,000 income? He wanted to have 400,000 a year spending money, right?
Yep.
So he entered the query into AI. It gave him all things, and then he says, okay, what stocks do I need to buy? To get to this number, I also want dividend income. Very, very precise instruction. It gave him all the names, I'm like, oh my God, right? And so I tried it myself. I went to Gemini. I tried Gemini. I tried ChatGPT. I tried Grok as well. And I tell you what, right? Grok is the best, man. Grok was the best. No,
Okay.
seriously, it was the best. And these are all free version one, right?
Okay.
Free version. I keyed in my very similar prompt, right? I got an amazing response, Like
Wow.
first iteration, amazing response.
Mm.
So if you were like a kid, right, and you're contending with this down the pipe,
Yeah.
how would you advise the guy?
Yeah. I mean, the sort of principle that, again, this is perhaps slightly idealistic, right? Technology is, of course, a tool that makes people better, makes human performance. Now, this is with the assumption that this response with the assumption that, like machines do not become like super intelligent and, become smarter than humans and basically Terminator scenario, right? That's the thing that I'm discounting here, okay? So I'm going to say that, machines, of course, they can crunch numbers better, they can, do modeling, forecasts, and so on. But there's definitely elements of humans that we need. So, for example, judgment, wisdom, especially if in terms of client-facing roles, I think most people or the majority of people would actually want face-to-face interaction with a human as opposed to a robot. So yeah, ideally, in a very idealistic situation, we use all this AI, we use all these tools to enhance ourselves so that we still have jobs and we still are able to contribute.
Okay, then I also want to ask you about investing.
Right.
So it's easy to just say, oh, go and invest, right?
Yeah.
I've been studying about investing a long time. I started at 19 years old, right? And it took me a really, really long time. My epiphany really came only about 5 years ago, okay? But for the person who's starting out, even people my age could also have never invested, right? You've got so many things to know. Every single asset class is encyclopedic in depth by itself. Property, boom. Stocks, boom. Right? Fixed income, boom. Right? Currencies, boom. Commodities, boom. Digital assets, oh my God, you don't even start about digital assets, right? Precious metals,
Yeah.
And then you got collectibles, right? Automotives, watches, handbags, sneakers. It's going to blow your mind. And you're going to make a lot of mistakes, right? So how would you advise people who are starting out in their investment journey?
Yeah. So I'm philosophically in terms of investment philosophy, I'm quite, there's a subset of investment people who call themselves bogleheads, or it's the same philosophy of Jack Bogle, who was the founder of Vanguard. Yeah, founder of Vanguard. And then, of course, there are people who are pro passive investing. So basically, they invest in indexes, and also low cost funds, right? I quite like that approach. Because it allows the majority of your investments to basically be guided by broad indices. So like the broad stock market or the broad bond market. And your bet is basically that human ingenuity as a whole will move forward, right? So, the stock market, companies come and go, but the overall stock market, hopefully we are trending in the right direction. Now, I think there's some nuances here. Historically, perhaps the US stock market is much more stable and doing much better than, say, an emerging market stock market. So I think that would be one interesting one I would look into, which is passive investing in, say, US stocks, because that there's a lot of literature on that. But if you talk about local, I can't think of a better investment vehicle than the EPF, because track record in terms of performance and so on, the EPF has actually done tremendously well. Now, there are some concerns around liquidity and so on. Like, if you put your cash in, it's not easy to pull it out. But arguably, the other side of the argument is a lot of people harm themselves by trying to invest a lot of money and perhaps not being able to generate returns. So I would advocate perhaps a balanced approach. So perhaps most of it or a majority of it, or maybe more than 50% of it is in something passive, like say the local EPF market for Malaysians, or if you're like a boglehead, something like the low cost ETF in the US stock market. Now, perhaps the more fun side of things, which I personally like, I do take some portion of my money and try to generate alpha myself, or I try to invest it in things which I believe in and things that I've researched. And I think in many, many of those investments, I've not done so well. But of course, in terms of digital assets, I've done quite okay. I've done quite well there. So I think the general advice I would give is you don't have to bet completely on yourself. Some of it you can put into passive investments. But over time, hopefully you'll be able to figure out which areas that you are good at investing in. And then, of course, you double down onto those areas. And then which are the areas that you're not very good in, and maybe you lose some money there, but you move away from there. So personally, like I only control digital asset investing for myself. Everything else is either in the EPF or I work with my financial advisors and I just let them figure it out.
Okay, so the fact that you got financial advisors, to me, I think that should be discussed as well, because traditionally for me, I don't use financial advisors, because my experience of them is that they very rarely, if at all, put your interest above theirs, and they would recommend products or solutions which would pay them a fee or commission, which gives them the fattest margins. So I traditionally learn to invest myself, and I take a lot of agency to do that. I know a lot of people psychologically cannot do that because, it's too difficult, it's too complex, I got no time. They'll find a million reasons to do that, right?
Yeah.
So that's a discussion for another time. But I want to ask you about the hurdle rates of return. So you say the EPF is 5.5%, 6%. It's really good. Compounding, eighth wonder of the world, blah, 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 right?
Right.
I think that the real rate of return, the real hurdle rate of return should be somewhere near about 10 to 15%. And the reason why I say that is because inflation by itself, CPI, the number that Malaysians use, is at best wrong. At worst, it's illegal, because it just skews everything, because it's a basket of goods that can be manipulated to suit policy. And in fact, your inflation and my inflation is very different. In fact, my inflation from week to week is different, because I buy certain things at certain times of the year. And it depends on my mood, depends on how good I feel, etc., how positively sentimental I am, etc. Right? So inflation is not 3 to 4% like what the government says. Inflation depends on what you buy. And inflation is dynamic. If you have 2 kids this year and none last year, your inflation is very different.
Right.
So that's one thing. The other thing is the amount of money in the system, right? We know about this, right? The US government is $38 trillion in debt. No sign of slowing down, right? And so the US dollar has lost like 99% of its value in the last 100 years. And that's the best performing currency in the world, because it's the global reserve currency, right? What about the ringgit? I shudder to think what the real debasement is. So let's just say, for arbitrary sake, it's 10%, 10 to 12%. If that's the case, if you're getting 5.5% from EPF, you're still losing money every year. Don't you think? So how would you advise people? I mean, should they even think about it in these terms?
I mean, this is quite. If it were 10 to 12% for everything that you are buying, then of course it's very, very concerning. Hopefully it's not that level right now. Food perhaps is higher, some other things perhaps are lower. But yeah, if we are in 10 to 12% territory, I almost don't have an answer, because it's really, really hard to beat that hurdle rate, right? Even if you're investing in S&P 500, and that's, I don't know, that's after inflate, that's maybe 12% average for the past 70 years. So
Well,
if
you
yeah.
all your dividends, is something like 13 to 15% the last 10 years. Before that, I don't know.
Yeah. So if even at that level, then you're only matching inflation, then that's really, really difficult, right? I mean, the other things that, I personally invest in, so for example, digital assets, Bitcoin and so on. Historically, Bitcoin has done very well. CAGR over the last 10 years, 15 years is very, very big. But also this kind of assets come with high volatility, right? So also I'm not going to tell anyone that, okay, you should just invest purely in Bitcoin. Yeah, I mean, hopefully it's a balanced approach. So you might need higher risk versus reward kind of investments, for example, digital assets, or more into equities, more in the stock market, to help balance out your to help increase your portfolio returns. But again, if we are facing a scenario where it's like 10% inflation every year, I'm not sure I have the answer there.
I mean, look, just anecdotally, right? Don't even talk about insurance products lah. Talk about things like your teh rate, right? Talk about things like your roti canai. Talk about things like your household goods, just the price of vegetables in the market, prawns, kangkong. It's gone off. It's like fruits, right? Like fruits, like just oranges, right? It's crazy price. And the people, the merchants in the market, they got to pass on the cost because they are getting hit as well.
Right. Right.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
not just money printing lah. It's like the supply chain shocks. It's like the war in Iraq, the war
Yeah.
in the Ukraine, and blah blah blah, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds as if you've got no choice but to really, really understand investing and financial management, which I think a lot of people still don't because, all these scams and Bank Negara, they talk about that. And people, they feel they need to get control of their finances. And then they go and fall prey to a scammer. And so it's also the psychological element,
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the challenges, especially, well, I see this a lot in younger investors, right? But I can see how it plays out in other segments of the investing. So a lot of young people today, from what I read, it's like they think about, I have to slave away for 20, 30 years, my retirement is not certain, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to afford a family and a house, right? So that leads them to, now whether this is true or not, or whether it's a perception, I think that's a question for another day. But this kind of belief sometimes leads you to basically go in with they call it the lottery mentality, right? Or the jackpot mentality. So it's like, if my future is so uncertain, right? Why don't I just like punt everything on like a weird like crypto coin, not even talking about Bitcoin, right? Talking about like a random new, they call it like shit coin, and then hope it goes up and I hope I win the jackpot and lottery, right? Because if I lose all my money, then, it's the same situation as I am now. Now, I think that kind of thinking is quite dangerous, and we see it in all across levels of society, right? So if you're an older person who's never heard of crypto, etc., you're thinking, oh shit, my life is so difficult. I might as well like punt it on this scammy thing, right? It sounds too good to be true, but at least it gives me a chance. So I think it's quite sad to see, but I wouldn't say that people get scammed just because they don't know or they're uninformed. I think people get scammed because they've lost hope with the existing system, or they are just desperate. So yeah, it is quite concerning.
Yeah. I was listening to this podcast the other day, American, of course, right? Actually, British guy that lives in America. And he was quoting some points which were actually quite concerning. The number of males that are single past 35 is gone through the roof. So they can't
Right.
get married. They can't afford to buy a house.
Right.
I think median price of a house in America is like 440,000 US dollars or something. It's
Wow.
insane, right? I don't even know what it is in Malaysia. Maybe 300,000 ringgit, which is a lot of money, right? And then the number of males who are getting married by the age of 30 has like created, it's fallen off a cliff. And like 65% of them who do get married after the age of 30 end in divorce. And then if they have a second marriage after that, the rate of divorce is like 75%. And then if they have a third marriage, it's like 92%. So it's like there's despondence everywhere, and I see the world, right? And financial freedom seems to be this big dream that very few people are trying to attain. And I think that's why people are looking to digital assets and, they're not getting married, they're not having kids anymore. Some of them, I see them, they are not even buying a house, they're just renting or staying in their parents' house. In America, they're actually moving from house to car or living in a van, right? It's a weird world, man.
Right. Right.
It's a weird world.
And I think I can also understand, right, why people spend their time perpetually online, or they get into like weird stuff like talking to AI as a friend, or talking to AI as their romantic partner, because it offers them a way of escape, right? Like if your current situation is pretty painful, then you want to find a way to escape lah. I think just on your point on how people can reach financial freedom and have more I guess more fulfilled lives that's not so scary, right? I think one thing that I heard recently, also I heard from my wife recently, which was really, really good, is that financial freedom doesn't mean you have to be able to stop working and do nothing, right? Actually, there are levels to this also, and perhaps one level which is hopefully more attainable than I stop working and retire forever. One level that's more attainable is you have some form of savings, some form of security, which allows you options, right? Which allows you options. And I personally am in the camp where I hope I don't have to retire one day. I hope I can still be working on things that are quite meaningful to me or quite interesting to me. So I think getting to a level of financial security is the dream for me, for most people, because that gives people options, right? So level 3, you have options. It's not about like I stop working forever. I need some level of comfort, security, so I can explore options to give myself a better life. And I think that part is a more attainable version of freedom.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron, I'm something like 20 years older than you, and to people my age are talking about retirement and all these kind of things. And the traditional definition of retirement is that you stop working,
Mm,
your income dries up, and then you
yep,
got to try and make your savings last for X number of years, right? I don't think that's optimal. I think that people should continue to work and gain some sort of income, but doing
yep,
things that you want to do,
yep,
things that fires your passion, things that make you want to wake up in the
yeah,
morning. It could be
yeah,
content creation for all you know, right? It could be
right,
writing on Substack. You can make money from Substack, right?
yeah,
You could be whatever, selling whatever stuff. And you could be a trader, you could trade stocks or trade
mm,
whatever, right?
sure,
And I know a lot of people who love doing that. So that's something that I think people can consider. But
mm,
I wanna talk to you about this article he wrote in 2022, and it
okay,
was a question that I used to ask my friends all the time until I got a bit older, lah. Which was like,
okay,
"What's your number?" You know that one? What's your number, right?
okay, right, right,
I
yeah.
used to go around people asking people, "Hey, bro, what's your number?" They were like, "What number? What number?"
You asked me
You
that
know?
once, yeah.
Did I ask you that?
Well, you did ask me, you asked like, what's a number for people? Not specifically
Yeah,
me,
yeah,
but like, yeah,
yeah,
you
yeah,
asked the number,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So So now I know that actually it's meaningless. That number is meaningless. You know what I mean?
Mm, mm,
But
mm,
how do you think about it? Because you wrote about that 5 in 2022, right? And
yeah.
you said at the time that your number was 2 million ringgit.
Yeah, yeah. I think, it's one of those things which is a moving target because back then I wasn't like I was single, it's just me, right? But people move through different stages in life, right? So for example, if you have kids, if you have kids and then you're the type which is a little bit more like me, which I like to plan ahead and so on, they have to think about their school fees and their education and so on. And then your number like moves up and up and up, right? And I think as humans also you get used to a certain lifestyle. Of course you try to control it and manage it, but your desires also change over time, right? So I think that number is obviously much higher today for me, okay? But I like how you look at it. To me it's less about oh, I have to hit this number because after that I just want to quit everything and I just want to do whatever I want, right?
Yeah.
I think the more reasonable approach is to find something that to number one, to get to some level of financial security, which gives you options. Number two, to hopefully be able to shift your career in the direction that you want, right? So today you might not like 80% of what you do, right? Next year you move to a job or a role that you like, you dislike like 70%, right? So you're moving constantly in the right direction. I think that to me is much more motivating than, you just look at that big number and like, oh, I'm never gonna reach that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, right. So having that, I've stopped asking people that number already. It's like meaningless. It's irrelevant. Doesn't mean anything. So a few days ago, I played tennis with this guy, right? And he's in his early 40s lah. And
Mm,
he told me that he invested like a lot of money into this pickleball thing, right?
wow.
500,000 ringgit, right? And he's quite young. I mean, at that age, I did not have 500,000 ringgit, right? But 500,000 ringgit is about 120,000 US dollars, right?
Right.
But he's the kind of person that is like one of those, right?
Mm,
Right?
mm,
So he collect from here, he collect from there. Then over time, he amassed this money, but it didn't come overnight, lah. It didn't come in one transaction.
right.
So the other way to think about it is like, okay, what if you go and buy? Okay, this is crazy for most people. They think it's mad, right?
Mm.
Because 500,000 ringgit, right, is one Bitcoin, right?
Okay.
It's one
Yes.
Bitcoin, right?
Today.
I
Yeah.
think
Today.
how much is that? 460,000 or whatever, right?
For 80, I think. Yeah.
480 or something, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you not do this, which is like brick and mortar, your partners, there's interdependencies. People are fickle. Today they play pickleball, tomorrow they play, I don't know, whatever.
Mm,
Tiddlywinks, right? I don't care, right? And then your money's stuck in there. It's illiquid.
right.
You can't. It's not a public market. You can't sell your shares, and it's committed, right? It's like the cement and it's the court and it's like the net and all that, right? There's
Sure.
glass. Do you advocate or would you? I mean, personally, privately tell your friends and family, hey, if you, up your allocation from I don't know 2 or 3% of your net worth to maybe
Mm,
whatever it is that you're comfortable with, and say, look, Bitcoin's done like what 50-60% CAGR for the last 15 years, right? Even
mm,
with multiple 95% drawdowns, right?
right.
How would you think about that? Would you advocate like whole coinership?
Yeah, I think it's always a bit hard to, because this kind of like financial advice, and I also like not supposed to
Yeah, we're
give.
not financial
Yeah.
advisors, right? Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I mean, I've always viewed it as a portfolio allocation strategy. I've never been about all in because, I can't for the life of me think I would go all in into anything when it comes to investments, right? So the way I've gone all in into like Bitcoin and stuff is I switched my career. My career went like full time into Bitcoin and crypto. That's the way that I went all in, right? But that way, I'm pretty certain like there's not much downside, right? Like if I, for example, many years ago when like Bitcoin crypto was new, I went into it. I know that, if for whatever reason it doesn't turn out, I lose my job, I can, go back to another like different industry. I can get a job there. So that was my way. But, to take your hard-earned money of say, 500K and put it all into something, I would actually caution against that because, what if, it doesn't turn out well? So, I'm not just talking about digital assets, right? I think just the general principle of going all in into something. Yeah, I'm too risk averse for that. And that is why I will probably never be wildly rich in a short amount of time, but I
Yeah.
will also probably never be wildly poor in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I think I'm very similar to you because I'm like, although I appreciate the power of concentration, diversification has its benefits because
Right. Yeah.
this one's Kala, the one got, right? And
Yeah.
EPF is
Yeah.
a big thing, even though it's only 5.5% a year, but it's at least something you can rely on, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also like, I'm not sure what your friend's financial background is, right? For the 500,000 all in, maybe at the back he has like a few million, right? So 500,000
Yeah,
is
I don't know. I don't know.
yeah,
Yeah, could be, right?
maybe it's like 10% of his investable assets. Like he went in big at 10%. But I think again, the more you're stable, you have a foundational stable level, then of course you can afford to take more risks lah. But I personally wouldn't.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't want to take up too much of your time, Aaron, but we've been talking about the whole idea of the 6 levels of money, and it's basically financial, material wealth accumulation. We know, especially people my age, we know that the real value in life as you get older is not just financial, because as we get older, right,
Yep.
we actually buy less things. Literally,
Yeah.
right? You don't crave the car, you don't crave the house, you don't crave the watch. You see that the ridiculousness of paying for designer stuff, literally, right?
Mm-hmm.
I see the kind of stuff that they're charging for designer clothes, and I'm like, are you fucking crazy, yeah, right? It's not even because it's made in China. So we've gone beyond the advertising. We've come, we've come
Mm,
full circle. Now we realize, I see, it's a game. Right?
mm,
It's how you manipulate buying habits. Right? So the older you get, the less you buy, and then the less important money gets. And then at the same time, you realize that friends, your health,
right.
your relationships.
Yeah.
So you wrote an article called Satisfaction, right?
Yep.
And you talk about how there was this woman, Hattie Green.
Mm-hmm.
She was the wealthiest woman in America, but she was a real miser, right?
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
then you know what I mean? So I think the younger generation, your generation, you
Yeah.
understand, you really understand, like, traveling and finding meaning in what you do and passion and all that, which my generation never had, We would just like go out there, get your university education, start
Mm,
working. Don't
right.
care whether you like your job or not, you just bloody do it because you have to make some money, right? And then you just suffer for like decades, and then you retire at 55 and then you die, right? It's like, that's my generation. If you were lucky, right? If you're lucky, you made it a few years past retirement and then you could even retire, right?
Mm.
So talk to me about satisfaction.
Yeah.
Talk to me about value and meaning.
I like what you mentioned about like what is true wealth. So I'm halfway reading this book. It's called The 5 Types of Wealth. It's quite an interesting book because I think wealth is most easily measured in dollars and cents or Malaysian ringgit. It's very quantifiable. So because it's quantifiable, most of us end up thinking that wealth is just money. But actually wealth has a lot of things that you've mentioned. So friends, relationships, finding meaningful work, health, right? These are like other aspects of wealth. And my perception is that, well, not my perception, it's a quote from the book, which I really like. It says that wealthy life, paraphrasing a bit, your wealthy life will start with financial security, some level of financial security, but it will be defined by other types of wealth. Okay, so you start with money. You do need to get to a certain level of comfort and security to take care of your basic needs, right? You do need that. Otherwise, it's very hard. But apart from that, how you define wealthy, that depends on, how healthy your relationships are, whether you're getting along with your family, or whether you're excited to go to work. These are the other aspects of wealth that often get ignored. So your question around satisfaction, I think satisfaction is also a very, very important thing to think about, because the formula for unhappiness is basically, if you constantly expect more than you have, you will always be unhappy, right? If you always want something more than what you have, you will always be unhappy. The other side of that is also true. If you're constantly satisfied with what you have, that is what leads you to happiness. Now, there are some nuances again, like, you do want to reach a certain level of financial security, and then, as you earn more, then your desires also grow and so on. But generally speaking, what you want is to not expect too much, and then you will be satisfied in life, and that will lead to happiness.
I remember years and years ago, there was this movie called A Beautiful Life. And it started, I think was written by and directed by a guy called Roberto Benigni, right?
Yep.
He was a prisoner of war, I think Jewish guy,
Yeah.
camp, right? And him and his son, they were separated from their family.
Yeah.
He had this ability to weave this narrative about how it was exciting and adventurous, and he really the boy was like happy and running around, but actually, oh my God, he was suffering the atrocities of Nazi Germany, right? And it's all in the mind, right? It's we tell ourselves, oh, we want to get the DM, or we want to get the bungalow, we want to eat in whatever, right? And we need to go to London every year, but your wallet kosong, bro. And you don't need to do that, mate. You know what I mean? You don't need to have the big car that you're buying stuff to impress people that you don't even like,
The movie that you mentioned. Sorry.
Yeah, and you wrote about this actually. You wrote about this because it's about optimizing your life, right? And then it's about the flex. It's about the different kinds of flexes, right? Material flex, religious flex. There's a lot of flexes that all these games that human beings play,
Yeah.
And I'm glad at your age you realize all this, because it's actually just a game. It is so pointless.
I think what you're referring to is an article I wrote about status games.
Status flexes, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So back then I used to think that, the only status game people play is the game of money, right? So who is richer than the other? Then I used to think actually I'm very cool because I don't think so much about money. And then I realized I'm playing all the other status games, right? Not the money game. I'm playing like the popularity game, or the, there's so many games that people compare themselves. And I agree that, a lot of this is actually meaningless. It's meaningless if all you want to do is like, I'm better than that person, and it strokes my ego. And it's actually quite unhealthy. And, I don't think people can get 100% away from this kind of thing. But as much as possible, you want to be doing things or you want to be spending money in a way that benefits you and your family and your loved ones. But you don't want to be spending money for the sake of impressing people, or like, just like, I want the status, I want to look cool. Because I think as you go older and wiser, you realize, I think we have both realized that most of that is actually very meaningless.
Yeah. So you've seen the movie, right?
I love that movie.
It really touched me, man.
Yeah. The ending is so tragic, it's so sad.
Right.
It's I still remember that movie until today. I watched it when I was quite young, but it's tremendous.
So you read a lot of books, right? What would that? I don't know. It's very difficult, right? It's very difficult because I struggle with it, right? But what are the 3 books? If there's only 3 books you can bring with you, right, and understand life, right? What would those 3 books be?
Wow. Okay. First of all, I'm quite a poor reader. I'm terrible at reading books. Actually, I'm actually much better at reading online articles. So I don't know if you call that junk food or
Okay,
what.
yeah, but so it could be articles, right? I mean, certain articles can really touch you and alter the course of your decision making. It could, right? Clearly.
But again, if you're talking about books, I really like The Psychology of Money. It's Morgan Housel. A lot of my beliefs about money, a lot of it I learned from that book. Some of it is validated. It's like, I kind of believe in this, and then it's like very good to see that, okay, other people believe in it. It's been validated by research. So I think Psychology of Money, that's one. Second interesting book. Let me think about it for a while. I'm gonna share a religious book. So this is the Bible. I don't know if you find it surprising, but I actually find that religion aside, I hope no one gets offended, but I think there's a lot of interesting business or general life principles in the Bible. And I think many Western governments, especially in the areas in terms of business and how things work and rules and so on, the Bible actually has a lot to do with how those rules were drafted and so on. So I think even if you take away the religion aspect, but if you look at it purely from like a business perspective and what can I learn and so on, actually the Bible has quite a lot of interesting lessons. The third book that I want to mention, wow, this is an interesting one. What would be the third book? This is seasonal. It's ask me 5 years time, it may change, but my sort of gateway into the digital asset world was a book about the initial believers in crypto. Right, I'm trying to think about the title of that book. You give me like 5 seconds, I will get you the title of that book. Let me see. So yeah, it was about the people who, crypto today is very different from crypto it was like 13 years ago. Okay, the book is called Digital Gold. Yeah, so where did Bitcoin come from, how it started. And I think this book is sort of mind-blowing because when you get into digital assets, Bitcoin and so on, you think about things that have existed for, maybe hundreds of years. And then you think like, hey, why do we do things a certain way? Is it like, is this based on the laws of nature and laws of physics? Or is it just a man-made creation? And it makes you question like, hey, actually, we don't necessarily have to do things a certain way. And I think that's where the idea of decentralized digital assets and so on, they came from. It's just questioning the way things work and, coming up with something, hopefully this is something better.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna not take up too much of your time. I want to end with, I guess, your key financial principles, the ones that you live by, just to leave as a kind of parting shot. The three kind of like immutable laws of financial literacy, financial laws that you abide by. What would those three be?
The first, I think, is that higher income is always going to be helpful. And, it may sound like very, very silly, right? Like, of course, everyone knows like higher income is better, right? But I put it there because when you get into personal finance, then, some guy will tell you that, oh, I can give you an investment that will generate 20% every year, right? And then you're like, wow, this is going to set me financially free and so on. But many people fail to realize that if you're coming from a small base, something that gives you 20%, if you only can put in, say, ringgit into that 20% investment every year, it's not going to amount to much, right? It's starting from a small amount. Even a big percentage is not going to help much. So, number one, income, as much as possible, try to find ways to increase your income, whether that's, gaining more skills or learning to use AI and bring it to work or something. So that's number one. I think number two is something that we talked about. Try to manage your expectations, your ego, your need for luxury and so on. It's not that luxurious things are necessarily bad in themselves, right? But if you constantly have that need for something, to show off or to feel like you're better than someone, it's going to be hard to manage your spending, right? And if you're constantly spending money, like what you said, to impress people and so on, you might find that you don't have much left to save and invest for when you want to do things like, I want to chase my dream job or something, I want to take a pay cut and, try something new. So yeah, you have to manage your expectations and so on. And I think the last thing, it's not so much the money principle, but it's more like money is not the end goal, right? It's not about hitting the number. You hit the number. Even if you hit the number, then you realize, oh, what next, right? So money is actually not the end goal. Money is just a tool, how you use it to make your life better. And I think, again, you want to get to a certain level of security, of course. You want to get to a certain level of comfort. But apart from that, it is the things that make your life rich are things like family, friends, like playing tennis on, an evening with your friend. That's something that makes your life rich.
Yeah.
Look for those kind of things.
Yeah. Your second rule really resonates with me because, for most people, they don't come from a silver spoon, right? So then, if you make $1, right, it's how you allocate that $1, right? And if you allocate most of the $1 on stuff that you want to, you feel like you're missing out, right? Or your friend, your classmate buy a nice car, you must buy a nice car. Your friend moved to this neighborhood, you must also move to the neighborhood because it's like fear of missing out on FOMO, right? Or he gets to go to this place for holiday. I must also take my family there. So then they don't get to allocate that $1 into something which is going to be building value. It's got a sunk cost, right?
Yeah.
So I think, as you say, if you suffer from FOMO, you're never going to be wealthy, You got to be able to like have this thick skin and drive a shitty car when all your friends are buying like this like European car, you know? It's very hard. It's very hard, right?
It's hard. It's hard.
It's
I
hard. And
mean,
then
I still drive a 18, 19-year-old car. So, it's to remind myself that, I mean, I'm thankful that today, if I really wanted to buy a nicer car, of course I could.
yeah,
But, I still drive a older car because it reminds me, like, you
yeah,
don't have to do it. Like, you
yeah,
can,
yeah,
you can manage your desires.
yeah. What car is it?
It's a Perodua Myvi.
Nice, nice, man.
King of
Power,
the road.
man. More power. Fantastic. You remind me of a book I read years ago called The Millionaire Next Door. You don't know they're rich one, right? And the rich people, they behave poor, but they got more zeros in the bank account than the guy in the big house because obviously, right? They made better decisions. I'm going to leave links to your blog in the description, mrstingy.com. So that's
Thank you, Chong.
mr-stingy.com, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
And the link to this 6 levels of wealth.
Yeah, sure.
And please, the rest of you guys, go and read Aaron's blog. It's full of wisdom. If you could just adhere to half of his principles, you will be all right financially.
Thanks, Chong. Thank you. You're too kind, but thank you.
Okay, mate. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
All right.